Good evening. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Mustafa. My students call me Dr. Mus. I am the Assistant Professor of Management at Elon University and also Director of AI Integration at Elon here. I'm very excited to welcome and introduce our moderators and the panelists today. And there are a couple of things that I want to highlight. The first, Elon University is known for its experiential and student success-oriented education. What does it mean? Many institutions give opportunity to taught faculty members what is academic integrity means. We just want to give opportunity to students' voice and students leading these events as a students moderators, and we have some students participants. They are going to share their idea, experience, what a murky concept of academic integrity in the age of AI. Apart from that, we have a great panelists and speakers. We are very excited. But first, I would like to introduce our moderator. Today, we have moderator Ethan and Kennedy. They have been working with us in Elon AI students-led team. Some of you may be heard, we have Elon AI team located in Long Hundreds. Dean Ken Gaither just graciously host this place, and thank you for that opportunity to work with the communication school. And what I was about to say, here are students. Let's get started. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Ethan Riscoveles. I've been working with Mustafa for about 8 months now. I'm a student lead over at the AI Center, and I'm really happy to be here. I wanted to extend a thank you to all our panelists for being here. This is an important conversation that we're having. And yeah, thank you guys. Thank you all for showing up. It's important that we discuss these issues, and I look forward to it.
Hi, my name's Kennedy Jones. I'm a senior and I'm majoring in business analytics. I also work at Elon AI since January, I believe. But we want to have some introductions here. So if we want to start over here.
Okay, to test the microphone first. Hi, my name is Ben Hannum. I'm an associate professor in the School of Communications. I teach communication design. How many of you, just a show of hands, are getting extra credit for being here? That's fabulous. How many of you use AI right now? Excellent. I'm so excited to walk out and to see whether you think it's a tool for good or a tool for evil. Isn't that? I don't know what the verbiage was, but so I've been at Elon since 2014 for the last 11 years. And I am a fan. I'm a graphic designer, and I love using AI to expedite my workflows. However, not everybody in graphic design feels the same way. There's a lot of artists who feel like AI is a tool for kind of ripping off a lot of their art, their design, and I'm kind of approaching it with a certain set of sensibilities so that to navigate, because as you know, every tool can be used for good and also for bad, right? And so I'm excited to participate on the panel and to hear what everybody has to say about that. So thank you guys for being here, whether you're getting extra credit or not.
Hello, I'm Dr. Ariella Marcasels. I'm a professor in the Department of Religious Studies, and I approach AI both in the classroom and in my professional context really through a humanistic lens, through the lens of the humanities, the study of history and society and culture.
Hello, everyone. I'm so honored to be here today. My name is Anya Bradic. I'm actually a student here at Elon. I'm one of the student directors at the Center for Design Thinking. Last semester, I had the opportunity to create a workshop about ethical and effective usage of AI, working with the Elon AI Hub to get that started. And so that's kind of why I'm here today, and I'm going to be representing how we can think about using AI in a very ethical and effective way. Thank you all for being here.
Hello, my name is Joshua. I'm the other student on the panel. I am a senior political science and economics student. I am the research lead at the Center for Design Thinking, as well as an associate editor for the Issues in Political Economy Research Journal. So most of my waking hours are spent conducting research and thinking through how we might use AI. Well, now that my research is winding down, I'm thinking through how might we use AI to effectively push and create great products while at the same time making sure that we are attributing the right authors and we're making sure that the work that we are putting out ourselves is actually our work product and not the product of others.
Hello. Hi. I'm Elizabeth von Briesen, Assistant Professor of Computer Science here at Elon. Yeah, been here for 5 years and have been in teaching for 25 or 30 years in various places and different roles. And my research is in computational social science. So while I am a computer scientist, I do think very carefully about how technologies impact society, and probably one of the, you guys keep saying like, is it good or is it evil? It's not a binary. Like to me, it's a very complex question of how we use AI. Should we use AI? When should we use AI? So that's sort of what I'm bringing to the table.
Hello, I'm okay. Vladimir Bratic. I'm associate professor of communication from Hollins University. I'm exclusively here as a guest, as you could probably make a connection here between the last two names. I'm sort of a reverse product of nepotism, I guess. I'm just here as a guest to talk about what I see the role of AI, particularly in education. I'm primarily concerned with what does education look like in the age of 2030. I'm interested in what students are going to be doing in 3 or 4 years from now. From most of you, your first jobs are going to be in the office space of 2030. What does that look like for you? And do we as a professors equip you with the right skills for you to work in that environment?
Great. Well, thank you all for those introductions, and we're excited to get started. Before we jump in, I wanted to refer you all to, if you look to the back of the booklet that should be at your desk, there's this QR code with extra resources. If you scan that, there's valuable AI resources that we at the AI Hub have produced, including the AI student guide and other valuable resources. So before we get started, I want to lay out the format of today's discussion. Briefly, in a moment, we're going to start with opening statements. There'll be a question on the board. You could answer in about 5 minutes. Next, we're going to jump into our discussion. We have 2 questions that we're going to pose to you guys. And then at the end, the last 30 to 40 minutes, I'm going to give the audience the opportunity to ask questions. And panelists, you will be able to respond to one another during this time. Sounds good. So with that, the opening statement. Starting with you, Dr. Hanum, could you answer, what does academic integrity mean for you? And what do you think are the biggest challenges and opportunities that come with the rise of AI?
I might try to dodge this question a little bit here. Because we have so many students in the audience, when your professor gives you an assignment, right? What is your professor looking for, right? They're attempting to get you to solve a problem, okay? They want you to research that problem and understand its implications, its boundaries, kind of the core of it, right? And they want you to apply critical thought. And at the end of that, they want you to reflect on how that balances with your worldview, with your personality, with the factors that have formed and shaped you. And they want to lead you to an action. Sometimes that action is writing a paper, doing a project, having a conversation, something like that. So I don't know if that's a dodge, but I think academic inquiry means that those components are original, okay? And I think where AI can help with that is that it can deepen that, or it can guide those conversations, or it could lead you to better questions to ask yourself. But I also feel like it could be used as a shortcut, where you could avoid critical thought and thinking about a problem and wrestling with it and things like that. So as one of the commentators have already said, it's not a black and white issue, it's a spectrum, right? And so I think the integrity part comes largely from the student right now on how they use this, and by the faculty member by stating what those boundaries are, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
Thank you.
So I think that when a lot of people use the term academic integrity, what they're mostly thinking of are like are cheating and plagiarizing and like these other kinds of like academic integrity violations. But the principle of integrity is really about upholding something. And when I think about academic integrity, what I think about primarily is upholding the educational mission of the university and of higher education, really. It's about maintaining an environment in which actual learning and actual instruction is happening. And I think that the challenges that come with AI, Dr. Hannon just suggested some of them, but I think that there are two ways that the educational mission of the university might be challenged by this new technology. The first actually doesn't have anything to do with student behavior explicitly. It's really about the transformation of the classroom and of what we do in the classroom. So a lot of professors, including myself, are reconceptualizing our assignments and what we do in class so that it can't be done with AI. And that requires a lot more in-class time devoted to work. So we have things like in-class writing labs. A lot more assignments have to be like worked out or at least drafted in class. You might be assessed orally instead of in a written form or by a test. And we are also devoting a lot of our time, every single professor, to talking about AI in the classroom, its implications, how we use it, why we use it the way we do. All of that takes class time. It takes a lot of class time. It significantly decreases the hours that each one of us spend teaching about history, culture, biology, economics, anything. Which means that the mission of Elon, of university, potentially of higher education, is being shifted away from teaching you the things that they usually taught you towards teaching you about this one technology and how to engage with this technology. And that's a really big shift, right? And I don't think it's a shift that's often considered, and I don't even know if it's a shift that all of you would approve of, right? Like when you think that every single class you're taking has like a substantial percentage less about every single thing in order to make room for AI. The other challenge to the mission of higher education is the fact that Dr. Hannon has already raised, that it is now possible to produce any given assignment, any given thing as a product, right? And a product that is at least passable. But when students engage with class spaces from the understanding of their work as a product, then their risk is that they'll cease to engage in it as a process, and as a process that's tied to learning, in which the product is not the point. The process is the point. And the process is the thing that we are trying to impart, is the act of learning, the process of learning. And there's a concern that that students might come to think of what they're doing here as about producing a certain product, right, that they can take with them, instead of engaging in a learning process that will then support them throughout the rest of their lives. Thank you.
When I'm thinking about academic integrity, I'm very much thinking about ethical AI usage as it pertains to artificial intelligence. So I already mentioned I work at the Center for Design Thinking, and we've created this workshop to teach students all about how to use AI ethically and effectively. And kind of what we preach in this is that we can't quite use AI effectively if we don't know how to use it ethically first. So we kind of equip students with 3 main rules to use, to always have in the back of your mind anytime you go to use a chatbot. The first one is originality. How are we making sure that when we're talking about ethical AI, we need to be original in how we're creating content? You know, like if you were a painter, you wanted to make sure that whatever you're creating, whatever product you're creating, has some element of personality to it that you can directly link that that product that you have with some part of yourself. The second thing that's really important when it comes to ethical AI usage is accountability, right? Anytime we're using any kind of source other than our own brain, we have to cite it. Whether you're using a research article or some kind of website, it's important that we're whatever we're taking, we're citing that source. And the third thing is we call this thing human in the loop. We want to be the captain of the AI ship, if you will, making sure that even if we are using some kind of chatbot, that there's some element of humanity in our response, making sure that, like put yourself in the situation if you were in a plane or something like that. We would feel pretty uncomfortable if the pilot just decided to sit back and not fly the plane itself. We want to make sure there's some element of human who's still guiding the AI ship. So when I think about academic integrity, it's definitely always keeping those three things in the back of our mind anytime we go to use something like this. When I think about potential challenges, is that we aren't necessarily, as an institution in higher education, we're not necessarily equipping students with these three rules to have in their back of their mind yet. I think there's definitely space and with time, professors will kind of start to pick up on, like, I need to equip students on how to use it ethically so that they do use it ethically. If we're not, we can't expect students to use it ethically if we're not teaching them how to. And so I think that there's, it's asking for an institutional change for professors to recognize, if I already know, because we know that the problem isn't that students aren't using it, right? You guys all raised your hands. The beginning of this, when Dr. Hannum asked how many of you guys are using ChatGPT or other kind of LLMs, the problem isn't that we're not using it. The problem is that we're not learning how to use it ethically or effectively. So when I'm thinking about the challenge is we need to start institutionalizing how to use it in these effective ways so that we can then, rather than shying away from it and thinking about it as a shortcut, we already have that knowledge that we have equipped students to use it in good ways, and they can use it to help them with their work as opposed to a shortcut.
Thank you, Anna.
So, based on the work I do, a lot of academic integrity to me comes down to recognizing where your information comes from and how it was created. Specifically as it pertains to AI, it's really interesting because a lot of students and a lot of people think that what AI produces is just the word of law, and everything AI produces is accurate, and that isn't necessarily the case. So to me, the challenges and opportunities that come with AI, especially as it pertains to academic integrity, is that we, and I don't mean we like as individuals, but we as a collective society do not yet fully understand artificial intelligence, the tools of artificial intelligence that are currently available, and how their availability affects our day-to-day lives. I like to bring up this example. I think it's hilarious. So there's this linguistic convention in English called the em-dash. It's a punctuation mark. And it basically more or less died out around the 80s because, well, people stopped using it. And mysteriously, high school teachers started seeing in their course evaluations that their students were mysteriously starting to use the em-dash without ever having been taught it. We later found out that, well, it's actually AI, and that because the large language model they were using was trained on a lot of documents from the 60s, 70s, and 80s that, well, it was trained on how to use an em-dash, right? And I only use this as an example to illustrate the challenges that come with not understanding what we're using, right? That also brings an opportunity because it allows us to bring the right people into the conversation so that when we design these policies around AI and we start building this collective understanding of academic integrity within AI use, that the conversations are discovered together. At the Center for Design Thinking, we talk a lot about co-design. Let's design not just as designers, but like with our stakeholders and with the people that actually are affected by the decisions we are making. So moving forward, as we think through how AI affects academic integrity, and our daily lives in general, we have to really consider how our decisions affect faculty, like you said earlier, how they affect students and their day-to-day lives, how they affect learning, but also how can we best maximize these tools so that instead of hindering learning opportunities, they actually improve them. And honestly, I could keep talking, so I'm just gonna stop now.
Thank you, Josh.
I love the M-dash. Like, I love it. Yeah, so when they asked me to speak on this panel, one of the first things I started thinking about was what does it even mean to have integrity? And I don't see AI as a thing that changes what it means to have integrity. It's still connected to my values. It's still connected. Okay, so then what does it mean to have integrity? I don't like, it's not my area, but like, you know it when you see it, right? You know when you're dealing with a person who has integrity because they're not gonna go talk badly about you behind your back, or that if you ask them to do something, if they say they'll be there, that they will probably be there unless there's a good reason. That if you ask to get together to study for an exam, they're not gonna come in with like an old copy that they bought from someone or whatever, right? Like, we know what integrity is. Sort of. And AI doesn't change that. But it does open up a lot of doors that we're not really sure, like, what are those things? So when I think about this question, what does it mean? What does it mean to have integrity in the academic realm as a professor? That means that my mission is to educate, that I have learning outcomes. I need to teach my students well, and I need to be able to assess whether or not they have learned, they've achieved the goals that I've set out for the class. And it's on me to try to do that job well, to try to communicate in a clear way and in a fair way and in a transparent way with my students to achieve those goals. And for my students, integrity, as if I look at students and I think of myself as a student, it is to try to understand what the professor is asking of me, to trust that the professor actually is an expert and very likely knows more than I do about what their job is. Although in my case, like, I'm very open to communication with students, right? I want to know, like, what is this world that you all are living in? Because it's very different from like the 80s when I grew up, or the 90s when I was first in college. So, and that you as a student will have the integrity to understand what's in the syllabus, what's in the assignment requirements, and that you will honor that. So what are the challenges? It's in terms of using AI, right? Like, when do we use it? How do we use it? When is it helpful? When is it undermining your learning process? When is it looking like it's being creative and you're actually narrowing into like a cultural vortex that's informed by the training data? Like, what is happening to us? And this all, to me, one of the biggest challenges is to have some patience, is to have some patience with it. There are certain things that we know over time work well in education, and there are other things like AI where it's like, we don't know yet. And so I think it's a challenge for professors. We don't feel like you trust us to know what we are doing. And I think we often lack trust in our students because it's just easier to cheat. But at the same time, I have many, many, many students who I do have trust in and who show me all the time that they have integrity because they love learning. And what are the opportunities? This is a new tool in our tool. It's another tool in the toolbox. It is not like, it's not a miracle. It's a tool, right? And so how can we use this tool? And in my discipline, like, one of the ways that it's one of the most helpful is when programming languages have really bad documentation. It's really helpful for figuring out how to do this thing. Don't solve the problem for me, but like, tell me how to say it in this programming language. And that's been really, really helpful. I think specialized use is very helpful. So thank you.
great 5 answers that I could repeat and agree with all aspects of this. We could argue on both sides of this, but I'm going to change my answers just to kind of contribute to a bit of variety on the panel. I'm a communication professor and I teach classes in communication technology. I'm concerned. So let me just set the context for where I believe we are. So not many people, not everybody agrees this is where we are, but let me just put my 2 cents of where I believe we are. I teach communication in context, historical context. I look how do technologies transform society, and we learn from the best examples from the past. There is no doubt that we are on the cusp of another revolution in communication. We can call this information revolution, we can call this new intelligence revolution, whatever you call it, it doesn't really matter, it's gonna get renamed later. There's only debate about how big of a change this is going to be. Some people believe it's just a change, it's a tool. It's a change of a tool. This is just internet getting smarter. Some other people believe it is way more than a tool. It's for the first time the technology has an agency. It is different than anything else. And the impacts of this might be as profound as the impacts of printing press had on medieval Europe. That means huge revolutionary change of both good and bad, democratizing education, improving societies, enlightenment, scientific revolution. So that's a very kind of broad and optimistic belief that AI is going to cause that kind of a change. Some people who I would kind of call, be on a border of being kind of like, really, really optimistic about it, believe that this is as much of a change as invention of language was to Homo sapiens. That is a completely new environment, completely new abilities. And just to show you how optimistic or crazy I am, I believe that this is actually a change as profound as Cambrian explosion. I believe that this is going to cause a completely new forms of life. And this is now, again, it needs a context for this to happen. I don't have a context, I have 5 minutes, so I can't quite go into that. What I believe that we're witnessing is a new and profound level of intelligence that has been given to the things that never had intelligence before. I believe you'll be entering the workforce in an office in 2030 where the most things around that office are going to be connected not only to the internet, they're going to be connected to the AI, they're going to be smart devices, and possibility that your coffee maker and toaster might be smarter than your average communication professor is very high. The question then for you is, what do I do in the office of 2030 in which my toaster is smarter than my average communication professor? So what is academic integrity to me? How do we set up educational system knowing that this is our future? What is it that we can teach knowing that our students are going to be working along, collaborating with smart tools, smart technologies that we ourselves do not know how to use or how to integrate in our current teaching. So the question is, I think primarily the burden is on us, the professors, to figure out what can we do to prepare you for the future we don't know that is arriving, what we believe that is going to be profoundly different than what we are. I had some suggestions for that I hope I can get into later on, but I don't think that any of us would be able with certainty to tell you what is that thing that is going to get you to be profoundly prepared for the office work of 2030.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you all for these very insightful responses. We want to move on to our second question now. How can AI integrity be built into academic culture without academic policing? So if we already started on this side, so we can start over here. Sorry to swing. We can go back if you need.
I get to go with my original answer, and you have to change yours, so that's good. So here's what I've argued here, that transparency wouldn't need to be policed if educators embrace the use of AI in problem solving at each step of creative and critical thinking process. for this, let's run with a similar example. We all are using Google and Google Apps in different set of circumstances of today, and we do so almost without attribution. And the question is why? You know, there's been 25, 24 years of Google. What has happened in the last 24 years that it led us to such a common use of Google in such a way that we don't actually have to even give it attribution? So this is, I think, what is likely going to happen with AI in the next 5 to 10 years, that is going to become such an integral part of our life that we will be using it without thinking that is that novel and new. So here's what I thought to bring up here about all the things that we use at college without attribution, that I think all exist, are impact in any AI application that you're using today. They're all in one place, and I think are good sort of introductory step in what kind of AI should be done in a class. So here are all the things and resources that we use every day in college that we don't attribute any kind of referencing in our papers. So we use search engines to gather data. All kinds of search engines, Google being one of them. We use them to check for authoritative, reliable sources, find new stuff. We don't attribute that in our papers. We use word processors for editing, for spelling, for punctuation. I heard Grammarly is really big. Style suggestions. We don't credit word processor for our spelling corrections. We use thesaurus for rewording, rephrasing, reshaping claims, thoughts, reshaping arguments. We don't attribute it. We use student tutors. How many of you are student tutors here? Do we have student tutors? Okay. We use student tutors for brainstorming, for idea development, for personal advice, for personalized education. We don't attribute that in our papers. We use professors' office hours. I hope you use your professors' office hours. I truly do. By the way, you're paying for that, so I might as well. To ask for clarification, for elaboration, for personalized analysis, for contextualization. We don't attribute that when we finish our papers. We use our partners in groups and teams as collaborators to improve efficiency, productivity. So this is collaboration with other people, and we don't attribute anything. We use editing software for graphics, graphic design, audio design, visual design. These are all things that we commonly reach out to people and technology, and we are already co-working with those things. The things, whenever we work with people, we don't talk about that as collaboration. When we work with technology, and this is a new term that is going to be a common thing, we should be thinking about this thing as cobotics. It's a cooperation of human and a machine in order to achieve process kind of level tasks that are necessary in education. So all of these can be combined and found in any single application of AI. And this does not require a new approach, a new attribution, and can all be done integrated in the assignments that already exist for us.
Waiting for the timer. Thanks. I want to start out by talking about the word policing, because that word is loaded, right? You're saying, what that says to me as a professor is that if I am trying to ensure that my students, if I have asked them to submit original work, that I am policing them by checking. And so I have a huge issue with that, right? Are we moving into an era where it's just perfectly fine to submit something that something or someone else did completely for you as your own? Like, that's not okay in my courses. But I wouldn't say that I am policing my students. I am checking. Do I trust them? Some. Do I trust them enough to assume that they will be transparent in citing their sources? I have ample evidence to show that I can't. And I need them to know that. I need them to know that if I've asked them to do something, to do a thing, to where they have learned the techniques that they need to know in order to achieve that task, that I expect them to be the ones who have done it. And AI is not new in that, right? Like they used to look it up on Stack Overflow, or they get their friend, or you just pay somebody to take. I also knew somebody who paid someone to take classes for them. And so I don't consider this to be policing. I consider this to be upholding the standards of integrity in my course. And I must do that because it is unfair to my students who love learning and who want to learn within the framework that I have presented to them. Flexible as it may be, I talk to my students. I want to know what's going on. But it is unethical for me to not uphold those standards. And so I think that it is important in having this conversation to avoid those kind of loaded words. I wish that people would be transparent. Certainly, yes, there's a lot of nuance in where we should say we got help and where it doesn't really matter that Grammarly fixed a thing in my spelling. I don't let Grammarly fix my grammar, though. Don't tell me how to end my email. Like, just don't. But yeah, I need my students to understand that a quick answer, a quick product development is not the best path to learning in most cases. And it's my job, it is my responsibility to give my students the best opportunity to learn. Yeah. So disclosing AI assistance, yes, I ask them to do that. Just like if you found a little code snippet on Stack Overflow and you put it, right, cite it. But at the same time, like, that's not the same thing as asking it to complete your entire, the entire assignment that I gave you. So yeah, transparency is important, but there's a tremendous amount of nuance, and I do, try to be very clear with my students what the standards of the course are, and I feel a strong responsibility to ensure that those are upheld for me and for my students.
So I'm going to approach this question from a slightly different perspective, and it's building on what most of us have already said to some extent. So let me present to you academic integrity as a social contract. And for those of you that haven't taken a philosophy course or a political theory course, go take them. Faculty members are going to be a lot better explaining this than I am. But let's frame it like that. So academic integrity is this set of expectations that we agree upon as a society, call that society Elon University or academia, that we use for day-to-day life. To give you a very clear example, in our modern society, murder is not acceptable under a social contract. And that's the example, I'm stealing it from the professor who gave my political theory class a couple of years ago. So what's happening with AI is that it's disrupting this social contract. We had a set of expectations about what happens in the classroom, about attribution and like how do we give credit, and about how courses and evaluations look like. And here comes this little tool that is going to destroy everything. So now all of the expectations we had, at least to some extent, need to be reevaluated. But we're having to do that as students and faculty are learning about this disruptor. It isn't like a new gun is developed. We understand what a gun is. Maybe the gun will do different things, but we understand what a gun is. We don't necessarily understand what AI is. So we need to be very intentional about how we incorporate it as we figure out what these new common expectations are going to be. Because I came into one of my classes, and there's a faculty member I love. He's probably one of the best professors I've taken here at Elon. And for his course project, he made us write a paper that was essentially a summary of the 2 books we had read for this class. I didn't come here to learn how to summarize information. I'm sorry. I while I was writing this paper, I was also writing a paper for publication on small state image building, which is like actual developing theories. And I was working with another faculty member. So it pushes students, at least to some extent, back. Because the only way for this faculty member to gauge whether his students had appropriately addressed and learned from the course materials was to make them summarize 2 books. I now know that that's because we were the first semester after like the big AI boom. He taught the class, and now the evaluations are different. But it does illustrate a broader point. We need to sit down as members of an educational community, as members of this society we call Elon, we call academia, and actually understand what the implications of the tools that are being brought to us are, and then building those new expectations together, such that next time I walk into a college classroom, I won't be surprised by an evaluation that is gonna limit my learning, and instead I'm shown how I can actually approach these tools in an effective way that actually pushes my learning further than a college classroom ever could. Thank you.
So for me, when I think about this question, I think the first thing I'm thinking about is the concept of transparency. And for me, transparency just really begins with trust, mutual trust between professors and students, and setting clear expectations. I truly believe that if we normalize the usage of AI and we say that, we recognize that this is here rather than constantly fearing it or shying away from it, and it's kind of, I think this is where it does lean on professors to have these open conversations about AI with their students. Like, let's sit down, let's talk about what are the benefits of using AI? What are the limitations of using AI? In this class, what does appropriate usage of AI look like? So that way, when you do have an assignment, you don't feel like you are cheating or that your professor is going to come at you in this policing kind of way for using it. I think if we're not necessarily encouraging proper use of it, students are then going to go and use it unethically. It is up to professors to show students how to use it ethically so that they can use it ethically. And I think if we do this, if we kind of set the expectation that it's allowed and it can be allowed in these kinds of ways with these expectations, students are going to feel much more comfortable to self-disclose when they are using it. If they know how to go about doing that, I'll say the Belk Library has really, really fantastic resources for figuring out how to go about citing AI usage within your references page and within your bibliographies. That way, if we're setting the expectation that you can use it as long as you're following these parameters, both students and professors are going to come out of this with a better outcome. I want to share a personal example of a professor that I had last semester who I think did a really, really beautiful job of this. I was taking a policy studies course. I'm studying policy, public policy, and Professor Auditori started the class at the beginning of the semester basically explaining that we are going to learn how to use AI in this class. And you wouldn't think that necessarily like policy was always the place to use AI, but I really learned so much from the way that she tried to integrate it in a very ethical and a very effective way. We had an assignment in which we were not only using AI to help us look at, summaries of past policies that were written. There was a reflective aspect to it. So we had to use a reflective statement to say, here's what AI said, but here's what I found in my own research, and here's how they compared. And that was really good because we were able to actively see the benefits of using AI. Here's where it lined up with the actual research that we did. Here's where it got something a little bit wrong. And then one way that she was able to encourage her students to use this in a creative way, she had us come up with policy alternatives or new creations of this policy, new ideations. We had to think about reasonable, radical, and ridiculous policy solutions. This was really cool. Not only did we get to kind of do the groundwork of what was this policy about in the first place, we got to see how far AI could really go when thinking about ridiculous policy solutions. And let me tell you, we saw some really ridiculous ones. But this exercise allowed us to see how AI can be used in a really creative way, particularly with brainstorming. Using AI as a brainstorming partner, a brainstorming collaborator, is probably one of the most effective ways that you can use it. It's not necessarily giving you an answer, it's giving you reasonable, radical, ridiculous answers to choose from, so that way you can come up on your own with the best possible solution.
That sounds like a fantastic assignment. Like, it sounds like a lot of fun and really enjoyable. My question is, I'm a professor of religious studies. I teach about the history of magic. I teach about religion, magic, and science. I teach about the history and the intellectual traditions of Islam, and particularly I teach about Islam and other religious traditions in Africa. And I think my classes are a lot of fun. And if you signed up for a class like that, would you want me to teach you about AI? Like me, like this person here. I can. I mean, I could. I do. I have to right now. But do you really want that to be me? Because there are probably better people to do it. And when you come to learn something from me, maybe you want me to teach you about, like, I don't know, ancient philosophy, and like how Kepler and Newton engaged Plato, and I don't know, about contemporary witchcraft and that kind of stuff, because that's what I'd like to teach you, right? And I think that's what you want me to teach you. And for every conversation that we make about AI and integrating AI and how we're going to use AI, that's a conversation I could have had with you about demon summoning, right? That we didn't get to have. And that's a loss, right? Like, that is really a loss. I agree with Dr. Bryson that I don't like this word. I think it actually makes a false analogy. I think it compares the process of keeping people accountable to their own standards to the process of sending law enforcement officers into certain communities and not others under the presumption of continual suspicion, a process that results in greatly increasing contact between certain people and law enforcement officers, that results in greater jail time and a greater likelihood of ending up in a prison. And professors holding students accountable for their standards and their work is not equatable with funneling people into incarceration. And I don't think it should be discussed in those terms. But I think accountability is important, and I think accountability is a huge problem. And I think that as Anya mentioned, this issue is about trust. And at the moment, the trust between students and their professors is broken. And I think we should name that, right? And I think we should talk about it. And I think we should talk about how we can get it back, right? Because I think we all want to have it back. I think sometimes exceptionally engaged students underestimate the ways that unengaged students are using AI unethically in classrooms, and that they are doing so in ways that make it clearly untrue that simply incorporating AI will mean that they will stop doing it. For example, AI can now, yes, it can read and it can summarize, but you can upload 2 different works and say, what are the connections between these? Can you extrapolate different outcomes? It can do all the reasoning work for you as well, right? I've had colleagues who've walked into classrooms to observe their colleagues teach and said, oh, students had ChatGPT up on their computers. Every time the professor asked a question, they just put the question into ChatGPT. And the professor isn't even having a conversation with their students anymore. And that is a violation of integrity and of trust.
Like other panelists have said, there's an issue with the word policing, but I can promise you guys, I do not want to be the police. I would rather be a conversationalist I work from a constructivist teaching mentality, which means I kind of act as a Sherpa. I'm there to co-guide, co-learn, co-discover with students. And I might say, hey, that direction that you want to head, there's some swollen streams there, caution, there's some issues that you're going to have to, think about and decide if that's the direction that you want to head. But the things that happen in my classroom, I wouldn't expect to happen in another teacher's classroom. And so I'm working at the level with the students that I'm teaching, and I don't expect my policies to be everybody else's policies. Now, that said, in my syllabus, there's a statement that says, hey, AI, I'm a big fan of AI, but if you use AI on any of my project, it triggers a mechanism where you have to disclose it. That way we can talk about it, right? And we can talk about ethics. And it's not something that I necessarily have to lecture with everybody, but when somebody uses it, we can have a conversation about it, and we can say, if you did it this way, it's good. If you did it that way, it's a shortcut, and you aren't allowed to do that. There's some parameters. And I think we teach a lot like that. If I'm, expanding that broadly and saying like, hey, this class, here's our learning objectives, but they have limits, they have boundaries, right? But there's also some ethics and responsibilities for the faculty to cover those. And so what I guess what I would say is I work at one level. I expect my school to have a statement or a policy on AI, and then I expect the university to have one too. And I would hope that all three of those are in alignment and that I wouldn't have to act as the police.
Well, thank you all for your thoughts regarding that question. One of the great things about this panel is that it's made up of students and professors. It's made up of professors from a variety of disciplines. I think today there's an understanding that there's a bit of a antagonistic relationship between professors and students regarding AI. So I think forums like these are very important where we can address these concerns. That brings me to my next question, which is, what do you think the biggest misconceptions students and teachers have about AI is, and how do you think this affects their learning or their teaching? Professor Ham, do you want to start?
I don't know about you guys, but I initially started using AI like ChatGPT and stuff like that, and using it like I used Google, which I think was a huge missed opportunity. And it took me a while, it took me some extra learning to figure out how I could use it more effectively. And I don't know if you guys are in the process of like making your own like my GPTs and stuff like that, but if you're not, totally look into it. It is completely like game on. And it is, you can get a lot further with it because a lot of times LLMs don't like multiple steps. And so if you write one of these bots, you can create multiple steps, particularly for things that you use often and a lot. And so it can really help you expedite your workflows. And so one of the things that I think that faculty and students are doing is maybe not digging deep enough into AI to see where the real utility lies. I also think that there's a lot of professors with good reason who are wary of AI, and maybe rightfully so, think of it as a way to cheat or get answers or to avoid reflection or contemplation and things like that. There's a space for that for sure, I get that. But I also feel like maybe those same professors need to probably dig into the tools a little deeper and to find where some of the commonalities, right, to use their students' enthusiasm for wanting to learn and use AI and figure out ways to integrate it into the courses. Of course, I would rather hear you talk about demonology than your ChatGPT uses. I think that's valid. But again, when there's an opportunity to incorporate that and it doesn't feel like a burden, I think that it wouldn't be a bad idea to dive in and see what you could make of it.
So I think there's a perception that people, particularly faculty members who are hesitant about AI, actually don't understand it and haven't looked at it and don't use it. and are just kind of ignorant, right? Or simple, or fearful about something that they just really don't understand. And I just don't think that, I mean, I think that might be true sometimes, but I think that I have a decent understanding of this technology and the kinds of things that it can do. I live at home with a technology professional who works in information security and is very kind of heavily involved and invested in artificial intelligence frameworks, and who brings me new research on the subject. I have also engaged AI from a humanistic and a historical lens, particularly from historical theory. And I think that people who work primarily in technology don't give enough credit to historians and humanists and sociologists for how we understand the relationship between humans and technology, and how deeply we understand those things. And I would say a major misconception on the part of AI enthusiasts is to think that this is solely within the realm of science and technology. And people who are enthusiastic about this new technology and optimistic about it keep talking about the absolutely revolutionary changes that it's going to instigate in society. And I would encourage anyone who does think that it's going to be revolutionary to perhaps spend a little bit more time with people who have studied revolutions, right? And people who have studied deep changes in history and in technology, and have an understanding of the very rich and long and often non-Western tradition of thinking about what it means to be human and what it means to be non-human. Because many of these technologies are actually based and developed on a very specific model of what it means to be human, what it means to be intelligent, and how intelligence can be measured and assessed. These models were developed relatively recently. They are not the only models. They are not even the only models within Western society. There are many, many other models of what it means to be human and non-human, what it means to be intelligence, to reason, to be rational, and how those things could be assessed or measured. And there's a long, long history of thought about what the relationship between the human and the non-human should be. And much of it is not negative at all, but it's not the exact model that these algorithms are being developed and based on. What would it look like to build these algorithms, these models of artificial intelligence based on Amerindian philosophies of intelligence? What would it look like to build them on Chinese Buddhist models of intelligence? What would they look like to build them on Neoplatonic models of the rational, right? And how would we measure and assess those things? And what kind of new and different and wild worlds would we open up and unlock? And which ones are we closing down by focusing so narrowly on the ones that we have right now? These are all important questions, and they are humanistic questions.
So when I think about this question, maybe a misconception that professors have regarding student usage. Sometimes I like to think, I kind of give this example in some of the workshops that we've taught at the center of picture a student in your head who's like incredibly involved on campus, a good student, right? Finds out at 10 p.m. one night that he accidentally forgot about this philosophy 10-page paper that he has to write, and it's due at midnight. And so I think there's this misconception that this is all students, and what they're going to do in this scenario with, time shortage is go right to ChatGPT, put in the prompt, get the answers back, tweak it a little bit, so it kind of sounds like a human wrote it and not the chatbot, and then submit it. I think that this is where maybe some professors go wrong in thinking that this is how students are using AI. But I've even been challenged by some of the professors up here today thinking about maybe this isn't actually how people are perceiving AI usage anymore. Maybe, when it was first coming out, I think a lot of professors thought that students were using AI only to cheat. And that they don't know how to use it responsibly. I think now that we've progressed and now that we have had more time and experience with using it, I don't think it's necessarily true that this is the only way that professors are. I'm sure there still are some professors that think that this is the way that students are using ChatGPT, and so therefore they have to completely outright ban it. But I think even hearing from the professors up on this panel that they recognize that there is some good to it. And so that's kind of one misconception that I've even, challenged myself to rethink. But thinking about this, students aren't, I think there's this misconception that students are using it in ineffective ways. And it's not that the students aren't using it with the intention of cheating. I think it really points to a gap in instruction rather than intention. Students aren't going to these chatbots thinking, I'm going to crank out this 10-page paper because I just need to get it done. I think they recognize that there's really wonderful ways that we can go about writing these big papers and doing these big tasks, using AI to help us as support rather than a crutch. Let's use it to enhance the work that we're already doing as opposed to just handing it off as an assignment. But without guidance on how to use this ethically, students can't be expected to navigate it well. If there's no level of instruction of, hey, you have this huge paper due, let me help you walk through the steps on what it means to develop a good brainstorm, what it means to develop a good outline, what it means to think about two different arguments and holding them at the same time to embrace nuance. There's no way that we can necessarily expect students to go about navigating AI in these effective ways. And so I think what this means is we need to be using AI as support, using it through every step of the problem-solving process, whatever that looks. If you're writing a paper, how can we use AI at the beginning part of writing that paper all the way to the end of proofwriting it? But that really, it really does come back on the professors, and I hear what you're saying of there's other things that professors need to get to, but maybe it doesn't necessarily look like you are an AI professor on top of being a professor of whatever your discipline is. I think it's kind of how we talk about, I've had several professors who in the beginning of class say, here's how to write a proper paper. I'm gonna help give you the tools. Here are the steps that it takes to write a good paper. Let me walk you through it. Let me walk you through how you can use AI to help you go about these steps so that you are using it in an ethical way and I don't have to catch you going about it in an ineffective way because I didn't provide you with the resources on how to do it effectively.
I'm going to ask everyone a question. I want you to close your eyes and raise your hand based on the answer. So please close your eyes right now. Those of you who are walking out, let's give you a second. So please raise your hand if you know what LLM stands for. Okay, you can lower your hands. You can open your eyes. Less than half of the room knows what an LLM stands for. And as we understand artificial intelligence right now, that's really, really deeply concerning to me. I'm not trying to shame you. I encourage you to look it up, and I'm going to try to summarize it really quickly. Basically, an LLM is an algorithm that processes information, like textual information, and then grabs it to then predict language patterns so that then you ask a question, and it uses your question to build a language pattern through which it will then build your response. And this is not a great definition of an LLM. I'm not entirely sure I got that right. How can we be using AI every day if we don't know what it is? It's crazy. I've said this, I think, 6 times at this point, 7 times. I'm sorry to sound like a broken record. But the biggest misconception about AI is what AI is. We don't understand it at all. as a society at least, and certainly there's some very qualified experts who could do a wonderful job explaining to us what an LLM is and how it fits within generalized intelligence theory and how that might apply to artificial intelligence. But we don't have that opportunity. If we had such experts, then we would all know exactly and have the same definition about what AI is. And then we would be able to build this academic spaces that uses that artificial intelligence in an effective way. So let's reframe it. Let's genuinely think about it, because what ends up happening is, from the student perspective, they don't understand what an LLM is, which is, again, ChatGPT or other chatbots, at least in their current iteration. And then they go and they ask this chatbot, hey, I am a student in a Philosophy 1010 class, and I need you to write a 2-page paper on Plato. And of course they're gonna fail, because AI not only writes very similar things every time you ask it the same question, but it's also gonna make up stuff, because again, it's using predictive patterns. It isn't like Google where it's sending you to information. And yes, the current ChatGPT models, especially 3.0, has gotten better at that. But it's gonna make up a lot of stuff. The other day, one of my friends and I were using it to research a workshop, and it sent us to 3 links that did not exist. It gave us 3 links as the answer to a question, and not a single one existed. So let's understand what AI is, so that then we can build on all of those misconceptions you're saying, which are absolutely true. But in my opinion, the core of them is we don't understand what AI is. Let's sit down, let's understand it, and then let's understand how to use it effectively, ethically. Let's see how it applies to our different disciplines. Let's see how we might have these conversations about proper use and not proper use, right? But let's understand it first.
So I'm going to piggyback on that a little bit by saying that the AI that we are talking about today is a very specific type of AI. It is a large language model that we're discussing. They've hijacked the word AI to say that this is the only, learning from data in some way is the only kind of intelligence. So you can see me later if you want to talk about other types of intelligent systems and theory behind that in computer science, et cetera. For better or worse, computer scientists have been working on this. But it is a little bit, yeah, I mean, being very more specific would be, I think, helpful. But misconceptions. I think that educators may misperceive how quickly they need to change in response to this. There's this push. It's like you have to change right now. And people are like, but the printing press changes everything. The printing press took how long? How many, for a long time, the printing press, the telephone.
Hundreds of years.
Hundreds of years, right? What is happening to a world in which you introduce a technology of this kind and expect the response to happen immediately? It's a very precarious, I think, dangerous time. I've been reading 1984 again. Yeah. And so I think my students wonder if I'm a Luddite. I'm like, but I have a smartphone, a computer, and an iPad, and another computer, and another. Like, yeah, I use technology. I'm not opposed to technology, but I'm wary of technology. I am not interested in hype. And I think that that it's very important for educators to uphold the standards and integrity of their disciplines in the face of a push towards change that is happening too quickly. Students, I don't think students have a misconception about AI. I think they know what it can do. They know when they're using it and it's helping them. They know when they're using it and it's hurting them. Maybe sometimes there's nuance in there where they don't. What I think students have at least in my observation, have a misconception about is what it means to learn. They may not have an issue with using AI to write an essay that's not in their discipline. They're like, whatever, it was just busy work, I don't even care. And they missed out on an opportunity to hone their communication skills in an area where it might be more difficult for them to write, and that this is a good thing. So I have students for whom learning is a joy, and I see them. And they're my hope. And it's those students who I think are really the most important, for me, the most important students to have this conversation with, because they love learning and they don't mind sweating to learn. And I think that is the thing, right? Like, why is it all about, what happened to, like going and sitting under the sky and like thinking about things and being like, oh yeah, that would be really cool to write about that. Or I can't debug my code. Like I go for a walk and I'm like, oh, it was that thing, right? Like I put everything down, right? We're in this like speed trap or vortex towards like more and more and more and better and faster. And I think that is something that I push against even as a person who is a computer scientist. Yeah, that's what I got.
So I guess I'm on the complete opposite side of all of this, which is why you come to panels, right? Because you want to hear different opinions. I believe one of the biggest misconceptions of the educators today that we can integrate AI into education system partially, marginally, slightly. I don't believe in any kind of integration of AI in education is anything less but total. Total integration of AI that requires a total change. It is very scary to ask the question, what does total change mean? But I am completely, again, having studied history of communication and technology and how they change a society, and you're correct that these previous technologies have changed society over a long period of time. When you look into them, you see the shrinkage of time that each single following technology took to change the society. And the one that we've just experienced, the internet, took less than 10, 15 years. So I'm afraid that the one that was invented, that was released upon us in 2022, in December 1 of the, which is, by the way, you should also know, this is not the first AI that has been released upon us. Recommender algorithms, you should know about them because they know you better than your mom does. So just understand this. You've released your data onto platforms, to companies that do this for profit. It is just a matter of time before they integrate this data that they sit on with the AI to sell it back to you for $9.99 a month so that it can tell you who you really are, right? So, but that's a different discussion. This one is about how do we change education, thinking about the new world that we will live in. In that world, you're sitting next to a piece of technology that is a screen. And also, let's not think that the screen is going to stay the same. We have a giant screen, then the screen got smaller, then the screen got as a laptop, screen is now a phone screen. It's just a matter of time before that screen jumps in front of your eyes. There are 3 ways that they can jump in front of your eyes. It could be a headset, it could be glasses, it could be contact lenses. It is just a matter of time before one of these screens jumps into your face. What do we do in the office space when that is the case in front of us? What does education look like at that moment? How do we sit next to something that is called artificial general intelligence, which is a next level of AI that is going to be smarter than human being in every single aspect of human development? How do we teach in that environment? What is the role of a human in that environment? And I'm just talking broadly beyond office, because we are just more than workers. We are also citizens, we are parents, we have multiple roles. What are we like in that environment? If we don't figure that out, I'm afraid nobody else is out there doing this on our behalf. Sam Altman doesn't care. Bill Gates doesn't care. Just said that in 10 years we will eliminate quite a lot of teaching and doctor jobs. Barack Obama agrees. This is not a minority opinion. You will experience a revolutionary change in your society if you believe what I believe in. I believe it is the responsibility of us, educators, to figure out, to try to perhaps get a step ahead and think, what is education like in that in that society? And what can we do to prep you for that society? The scary thing is, I have no idea. I can try, but I cannot tell you with certainty that I have the right answer for this. This is what scares us most when we think about this time.
Well, I want to thank you all for your willingness to share all your different perspectives. I do think it's even more important to share when we differ in opinions. Y'all have all mentioned things that I didn't even think about myself. But I'm sure we have some questions here, so I do want to open up to the audience to ask any questions. And this part will be more informal, so the panelists feel free to respond to any comments or anything. Do we have any questions? Yeah.
Thank you guys. This was very, very engaging. It was really awesome conversations. I appreciate all your perspectives. So my question is around a lot of what each of y'all were saying was just like setting off light bulbs in my brain. But first, Dr. Marcus Sells, is that how you pronounce it? I loved when you mentioned education as a process versus a product, and I think that's really relevant in what everyone was touching on the panel. And then to your point as well, Dr. Bradich, I think it's just the reality that this is going to happen, and unfortunately or fortunately, we need to accept it, and bringing like that humanity back into education. I think you guys were all touching on that as well. So do you think that like it's too late, because maybe with the internet we have already kind of seen replace education as a product, university education versus a process? So do you think this takes like a greater cultural change across just academia in general, or do you still think it's going to be on a very like personalized level from different professor to professor?
A lot of what I do, I don't really necessarily, I'm not thinking on this and coming on my own. I read other people's, I synthesize, the cool skill that you learn in college, how to like get across a lot of viewpoints to synthesize. But I can tell you some of these scary things. You have Sam Altman recently come in here, says the AGI is coming in next 4 years. Once that is implemented, you're going to need a completely new social contract. Take that. Completely new social contract. Yuval Noah Harari says, once this is implemented, we will have a useless class. People who are not going to be useless to their mom, they're just going to be useless to the society. Okay? We have this is going to sound a bit, we have, you know how many math teachers are in the United States primary and secondary education? 1.4 million. Do you think we're going to need 1.4 million math teachers in 10 years? I don't know. I suspect we're not going to need them all. I suspect it's going to be a lot of Khan Academy, AI. Those are the questions that are profound questions that we're going to have to, there's going to be disturbances. Every revolution, every information revolution that I studied resulted in progress. Every single one of them caused disruption of a kind that we would not want. There is no doubt that this is going to be a both-ended kind of, both-sided type of situation that we're going to be in. If I'm drawing any kind of optimism, is from my studies of technology, that almost every single technological change, it once adopted by the society, has been adopted for one reason, because the progress won over the negative consequences of it. It is going to be painful, but it follows every single information revolution of a previous context. It should bring progress. That's as optimistic as I can be.
So I absolutely agree that new technologies transform societies, right? Like they change things, and they can often change things very widely and deeply. And the fact that this is a new technology and that it will change things is incontrovertible, right? Like there'd be no point in refuting that. And it is also true that the pace of change has been picking up. But for the proponents of AGI, who talk about it as a kind of totalizing and sudden radical transformation, as being a change, as to quote, as profound as the Cambrian explosion, that is what we in my field call an apocalyptic vision. Most people now think of the apocalypse to mean the end of the world, but it's actually not what it meant. It was a profound, radical revelation and transformation of the way things were into the way things ought to be, the way things should be. And as somebody who has studied apocalyptic visions and apocalyptic visionaries, I know that the apocalypse never arrives, right? It is always infinitely deferred. But that's not the important part. The important part is that the fact that it never arrives is irrelevant. People change their societies in anticipation of the thing that never actually arrives, which is why what Dr. Van Bryson said about precarity is so important. Because what people start to do is to reorganize in the hope, in the anticipation, when perhaps reorganization is not necessary. This is going to change us, but I would invite you to consider the mechanism of that change and where that change is coming from. I would also like to, I'm going to point to there was a recent op-ed in the New York Times, and by the way, all of you, you're members of Elon, you have free access to the New York Times, so if you think it's behind a paywall, it's not, by one of my favorite sociologists, Tressie McMillan Cottom, who's at UNC Chapel Hill. She published about the AI revelation, an op-ed, and she invited all of us to draw our memories back to another revolution that was supposed to be transformative to higher education from the early 2000s, and that was the MOOCs, the massive online-only courses. They were all the rage, if everybody can for a moment pretend that we're in 2007. The internet was going to open things up. It was going to democratize higher education. One instructor was going to be able to teach 100, maybe hundreds of students, all online. You don't have to come to campus. You don't have the money for higher education. You can do it all from the comfort of your home, wherever you live. Everything's going to be online. Everything's going to be asynchronous. And universities invested in this. And it didn't work. It was a massive failure. It collapsed completely. Most of these courses of study had less than 10% completion rates. Some of them had less than 5% completion rates, because it turns out people want to learn with people, right? That the humanity and the connection is actually what drives learning. And it's a cautionary tale on two fronts. One, it reminds us that however we transform education in response to what we think might be coming, we would do best to reorient it around the human, right? And that might involve reinvesting in the human. That might involve smaller class sizes. That might involve like more and greater connectivity. Human connectivity. But it's also a cautionary tale, because even though the MOOCs collapsed as a learning tool, they were very effective in hollowing out the academic workforce. And they got universities, they pushed universities to reimagine themselves as businesses, and to greatly reduce the number of tenure-track faculty members in favor of higher levels of contingent faculty members. And that has not been progress. That has resulted in greater precarity for people in the university system, in lower salaries, and I would say in greatly attenuated and reduced educational benefit to students. Not all technology revolutions have led to benefit or incontrovertibly to benefit, which I think is a better word or measure than progress. Change is coming. And how we think about and conceptualize change is as important as the technology itself.
Does anyone else have a question?
I wanted to note that I really appreciated the comments on how we can differentiate accountability and policing, as well as how we can acknowledge how AI is very transformative in the way that it can enhance critical thinking. However, with users' misconceptions and our understanding of AI enhancing critical thinking, how can we as students and professionals, like professors, doctors, etc., bridge the cultural gap between students and professors? Something that I've noticed is that there seems to be a disconnect between answers between how students such as Anaya, wasn't it? Is that how that's your name? Anya. Like Anya? Yeah. Okay. How Anya perceives and other students perceive the usage of AI relative to how professors do, as it is transcribed as this revolutionary and transformative, but almost detrimental to academia like tool. But there was also comments on like how it is a tool. Okay, sorry. But how can we bridge the cultural disconnect between students and professors as we are different? It seems that there's a huge cultural gap between how it's used. Because Anya mentioned that it is often used for framework essays, as well as like not being used to completely complete an assignment. But there's a common misconception between like professors that it is used to complete work and that it is used to completely transcribe information rather than enhance critical thinking. So how can we essentially just bridge that disconnect? How do we as professionals plan to move forward with that?
You want to go first?
What a great question. Thank you. You know what a fun thing to do is to upload your resume to AI and then ask it what it thinks about that person. Build me a summary. See what that person is projecting through their accomplishments, right? That doesn't cross any lines, and you can edit the information that you wouldn't want to share. But you get some interesting results from that. And then go find a job that you would be interested in having. And ask AI to summarize that for you without jargon. What does that person do? What does it look like, right? And then ask it, you know, how appropriate was this resume for this job? And can you make some suggestions for how I might change my language, maybe emphasize leadership skills, and it'll give you some suggestions for verbs. And now you have a whole lot of information and a new lens to look at your resume, right? So I think that when you use the tools and you understand the tools and you understand the academic landscape and what you're trying to accomplish and what you're definitely trying to avoid, that you can figure out a path that might work for both, right? And so I'm not saying that there's an application like that, you know, there's no tool that, like, let's say you had a hammer, right? They say everything looks like a nail when you have, all you have is hammers, right? And so, again, going back to this is just one way, one tool that you can use to give you some new insights. And I think that if you start there and you have a faculty member who's willing to discover with you, right? If you're looking at me as the authority on AI, we're in sad shape, right? But you say, hey, did you know that you could do this thing? And you're talking to me about it. I think that's the beauty. Like, that's the conversation that I want to have.
Ooh, quick comment. It's not a misconception that students use AI to complete their work. It's not. It's not every student, but if you're sitting on our side of the table, I could use words sometimes, and I'm not going to, but yeah, it's very, very frustrating. And I think for students who are using AI in ways that are helpful to their learning process, it's very important for them to have conversations with us around that, but to also respect the fact that we are dealing with too many students who are not using it ethically at all. And we're tired. I'm tired. I'm like, you know what? Not having that conversation with you again. I'm putting the papers into the academic integrity office. Like, I can't, I don't want to, I care too much. I put so much into my teaching and so much into my investing in my students that it breaks my heart. And it's definitely not a misconception that it happens. It definitely does, but like, how do I balance that with also respecting students who are trying to be creative and learn with me how to, you know, kind of integrate these things. But I think it's that my students need to trust that I actually really care, but they also need to believe me when I say I'm tired and that I've seen everything from 30 years ago to now. It's not new. And it is really, really, really hard sometimes. Yeah, we're people. Yeah, but go, you had.
I wasn't trying to say that it doesn't happen. I was more so looking at the overarching fact that like it isn't every individual who uses it, it isn't a majority. So that's
What?
I'm trying to say.
I don't know that it's not a majority. In some classes, it is at least half.
But how do we as professionals like bridge that gap if there is an issue with professors who are tired of this? How can we heal that relationship? How can professors heal that relationship with their students? So
I-
that we have the ethical practices that
Yeah. Well, my exams are worth 60% of my students' grade in my class right now. That's just I got nothing else. You have to learn, and the exams are on paper.
So,
Like, I don't know.
so you're talking about trust.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're talking about like you're phrasing as a disconnect. It is a disconnect, but you're also just talking about trust, right? And we need trust in order to let our ethical and our exceptional and our engaged students take risks and experiment and do cool things. We need to have a certain level of trust that that we're not going to get bogged down in investing a lot of our time trying to engage in work that had almost no input from our students, right? Because that really is a waste of our time. And it's really a brutalizing waste of time. So, and I think that actually all of us might be underestimating how important institutional structures are in maintaining trust, and how important even how important barriers are that make it hard to cheat, right? Are in just maintaining trust, just in knowing that it was that it would be hard to do it, right? But also things like accountability mechanisms. Like at the moment, our current honor code violation process is completely broken, right? I think that it's at least greatly weakened, right? And that we are receiving very little, in my opinion, institutional support from Elon for really pursuing academic integrity violations. Knowing that there is accountability, that there's a consequence, is in sociology, in like the field of criminology, one of the most effective things in keeping people attached to the social contract, right? And when that trust is restored, when we can know that there are guidelines and there are guardrails, then we can partner with you in new and amazing ways, which is really what we want to do. Like it really is.
All right, Josh, I'll let you get the last word.
I will also answer your question, and I think at the core, there isn't that much of a cultural divide as you're presenting it. I think this panel, if it illustrates anything, is that we may disagree on the specifics of some things, but overarchingly we all agree. And I will tell you, and this is not just true for me, maybe I was an outlier. No, I'm not. I've talked to many people about this. Many students are as tired of the ones that cheat to the degree you two are describing as professors are. I hate it when I go into a classroom and the opportunities that my peers from a year or two ago tell me they had in this class are completely gone because people abuse AI. So it isn't that big of a divide. The problem is, for faculty members, and this is something faculty members have shared, I'm sure those on the panel might agree, unless you know the student already, you can't know which side of the line they fall on. So how can they trust everyone? Like, yes, we should presume innocence, but how can we if evidence shows us that maybe not everyone is? And so it goes back to the institutions, and it goes back to a lot of other things that we don't have time to get into. But overall, I think the cultural divide isn't as big as we think it is. We're just pinning two extremes of the spectrum against each other, when actually the gray in the middle, that spectrum that Dr. Braddock mentioned at the start of the talk, is where most of us fall on a day-to-day.
So how do we bridge this disconnect? I think it first starts at framing the problem. Let's ask ourselves first, why are students feeling like they need to cheat to complete this assignment? That might be because they're actually really struggling to complete this one area. So I think we need to hold our professors accountable to, like, let's reimagine what assignments look like. Because I can tell you rote memorization and multiple choice tests are not always the most effective way to learn. They do provide us a lot of, standardization can be good in some areas, and objectivity is also good, but that is not the way of the future. And so if we're really thinking about how we're going to prep students for the workplace, it does require, let's get to the root of the problem. Why are students struggling in the areas? How can we use AI to help them in these areas so that they are more equipped to go and have jobs?
All right, wanted to thank our panelists. Let's give them a round of applause. They gave us